Now this is my favorite slide. And I don't know how many, and the reason I say this is my favorite slide is because it starts at 1966. And some of us here can say that we've gone beyond that. And when I was thinking about this slide, I said, so where are we before 1966? And I can tell you where I was. In 1950, I remember having one of the first TVs. And TV wasn't on 24/7. We had a few programs on sprinkled through the day. And since we had one of the first TVs, I remember we had it on a little shelf somewhere, and we had rows of kids in the neighborhood that would come for the Howdy Doody show. So that's my background. I mean, I can remember way back then, and, you know, I remember sitting around the radio, listening to radio. I mean, people today, I mean, you know, but on the other hand, what do you see? People are hooked into their iPods or their whatever all day long, so they're listening to MP3, they're listening to music, and they're, you know, looking at text messaging, doing things that I never did as a kid. So, you know, I mean, I think that if you look here, so the idea here is it wasn't as fragmented in 1966. If you were an advertiser, you could have a newspaper, broadcast TV, magazines, radio, and maybe the 8-track. Those would be your vehicles to get messages out, to get your content to your audience. It was very limited. As shortly back as 1986, you had a variety of more choices. You know, cassette tapes, Walkmans, personal computers, console. But look at this. It's basically tripled in a very short time. There are 30 different properties here, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are 300 social media sites out there today. 300 sites out there. So, you know, for an advertiser, this could be a nightmare. Not only getting in front of your audience, but think about the measurement of putting yourself on those properties and measuring your results. And I'll help you understand a little more. What's really nice about this slide, I thought, is it even had some things that I hadn't heard of, like Slingshot and the game thing. I'm not into games, so I don't know as many portals for games, but apparently games are really, really big on the internet. So people are really part of that game community. And if you're part of the game community and you're there, it's a great spot for advertisers who want to get in front of that particular audience. So you have to know that. So this would be an interesting slide for some of you to, you know, mull over and go on to those, you know, some of those sites to see what do they actually do, you know. And a lot of them are very interesting. Now, here's another trend. Consumers are spending less time with traditional media. What this slide actually points out is that there's a decline in use because there is an increase in use in internet. So a person has just so many hours in a day. And you can spend it in a variety of ways. So if you are spending it on the internet, you're not spending it as much on television, etc. So basically, that's you know, what that really says. Now, here's a slide that was interesting. We thought that watching less TV than 2 years ago. So the middle number is people who are watching the same number of hours of TV as they were watching 2 years ago. The 18% are watching more television than they did 2 years ago. But there's something that on the next couple of slides you'll see why that really is, even though they're watching more, it's not about watching more. Okay? So, and then 40% are actually watching less TV than they did 2 years ago. So the question that the advertisers have to ask themselves is, how does that trend ripple into my advertising reach?
We don't watch that.
Well, I'm going to get to that because I bet you have a DVR or TiVo. Or maybe not. Or maybe just fast forward, you know, whatever. But that's the quality, and that's exactly my point, because that comes up as well. So here's another trend. Consumers likely to surf the internet while watching TV. So now you have your computer, you have your cell phone. Kids are text messaging while they're answering. I mean, while they're talking to you, they're busy with their text message. So they are multitasking, where we didn't do that years ago. 5 years ago, we didn't do that. The technology wasn't there 5 years ago. The technology is there today. So, you know, the question was, this was a study. It says, how often do you surf the internet at the same time as watching TV. And basically, if you have sometimes, usually, always, and even seldom added together, that's a huge chunk. That's 76% of the people are somewhat engaged in the internet while they're watching TV. Who would have thought that? I mean, really. Now, what we were talking about before, even if you're watching TV. So now, let's say they get you, you are watching TV, it's not the Super Bowl, and even on the Super Bowl, that's the time to go out and get the snacks. So you're not going to even watch the big advertisers, although they try to make it so engaging today that you want to watch the commercials because that becomes entertainment, which you can then rate on your computer to tell them how you liked it. So it actually has an engaging element to pull you in and get you committed to actually watch that, watch that commercial. But here it says.
Sometimes it's better than the game.
Sometimes it's better than the game, and I think the last grading was one commercial won all kinds of awards. They thought it was great. So that's definitely something. But here's why people. This is what's eating into the space of TV. DVR users and ad viewing behavior. So, for example, with TiVo and DVRs, you can actually set those up to skip your commercials. So you actually don't have to watch commercials anymore. You can take multiple programs. You can do, with TiVo, you can do anything you want, but it skips the ads for you, and it does everything. So now the advertiser is paying all this money to be in front of the audience, and the audience is not there. So the audience doesn't even exist for that target at that time because it's totally, skipped. Now, this was an interesting slide because we felt that we should put this in because if you look at the internet has really grown in reach. This is all about reach. TV is still your broadest reach. TV still is the biggest reach. But as I said before, it's what are people doing when they're watching TV? What's the quality of their attention when you're serving that ad? If they're taping something, they fast forward it. So even though they're on TV and TV still is mass, there are other ways to get in front of the mass medium. And the other types of like newspaper, magazines, radio is still up there as far as mass reach, but again, it's very limited compared to what you can do and the properties you can use on the internet. So now it says that the internet is obviously the #1 medium at work. We know that people at work use the internet. They use the internet for everything, from their email being open all day for communication, for searching around for things that they need, communication within intranets now. A lot of companies that are larger are using intranets on a regular basis. So the internet is definitely on and being used all the time. So it's really right up there. Now, however, it's still the #2 medium at home. So it's still, the households are still using TV as their #1 choice of consuming content. Now, this was also an interesting slide because if you look at the households and the internet, all right, you can see that 28% of the population makes $25,000 or less, and of that population, only 6% are on the internet. So low-income houses, and the reason for that is most probably is they don't have a computer at home. So it's not that they don't want to, it's probably that they can't afford the computer, so they don't have a computer. And if you look, it makes sense, 25,000 to about 50,000. They're your young people with the initial salaries, etc., and it would make sense that they're the ones that are using the internet all the time, 100% of the time of their time. And then it varies, again, across the board. But you can see that internet usage for people of 25,000 to maybe 150,000, people are on the internet. This is a vehicle that is being used, and it's being used widely, i.e. mass market.